of Pitt football's spring camp is underway with the completion of practice number 4, moving right along down on the south side today, Tuesday, March 18th, as we continue to follow some of the storylines throughout camp, some of the positional battles, as well as we heard for the first time today from QB number 1, Eli Holstein, again from Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi, following the second day of full pads, with the first one coming over the weekend in a closed practice on Saturday. But a lot to get into. This is the Pittsburgh Sports Now Football Pulse. I'm Nathan Brysinger, the Pitt football beat writer over at PittsburghSportsNow.com. You can go and check out all of our coverage from today's camp practice with the sights and sounds, also some camp notes on that side of things. But going to be talking a little bit about Eli Holstein and some of the things he talked about. Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi as well spoke. Jake Overman, Sean Fitzsimmons also took to the podium to talk to the media today. And then along with that, going day by day, taking a look at the different position groups. Last episode, we talked about the defensive line. This one, we're going to talk about the linebackers, which will be followed then on Thursday, talking a little bit about the secondary. So linebackers today, and talking about, what I've seen and some of the things that have been standing out so far through the first couple of days, and getting an in-depth look at them today on Tuesday. But let's start with Eli Holstein spoke to the media for the first time. It's been a while. I mean, we haven't probably seen him. We didn't see him on the media side of things since he spoke following the California game back in October 12th of 2024. Then he got banged up a couple of games, then eventually missed the rest of the season after getting hurt at Louisville. So it's been quite a while since we talked to him, but he's in great spirits. He spoke for a while today. I mean, he didn't want to stop, and the media relations guy actually had to get him to stop his press conference because he had to get to class, and he wanted to keep talking about it. We talked a lot about football side of things, but he wanted to say, he said, "Hey, what about some personal questions? Ask me some of those," but you can go catch some of that over on our YouTube page at PittsburghSportsNow.com or Pittsburgh Sports Now. At least the first 10 minutes of it before he continued on talking about some of the personal things that he wanted to talk about, that some of my media colleagues talked about. But he talked a while just about, this new leadership role that he's getting into this year. Last year as a redshirt freshman in this offense, year one in this offense, where everyone was sort of learning the ropes. He didn't stand out as much in terms of a vocal leader. He was definitely a guy that led by example, of course. But this year around, he's really taking that next step and said, this has been something that's been instilled in him for a while, that, hey, I've been a guy that can lead things, but now I'm really comfortable in this offense, really comfortable around the guys. And he seems to be, picking up right where he was to start last year. And tight end Jake Overman talked about the way he is also led, just being a vocal guy, leading the team along through their reps, through practice, and that's what they're going to need this year. And, I mean, Eli Holstein has the making of being a really good leader, really good captain at some point, whether that's this year or in the future for this Pitt program. But just the way he talks, the way he carries himself, the way he takes accountability, which I thought was really important last year from his press conferences that he took a lot of accountability, shouldered a lot of the blame, which is a good thing. You want your quarterback to, be the spokesperson for that offense and shoulder some of the issues that are going on, and not put it on, spread the blame around. So that's the one thing that Holstein is looking to do this year. And he's also just feeling more loose out there on the field in general. And our one colleague, Jerry DiPaolo of the Trib, asked Pat Narduzzi the question that during practice he noticed there was a rep he took where he ran through the running back chute, ducked under, and then threw the ball at the fence and let out a scream. And when Holstein was asked about it, he was like, that's just who I am. You might have not have seen that last year, maybe because you guys weren't around a ton, but that's who I am. And this year, another step further and more comfortable in this team and around his teammates. I mean, you're going to see that probably some more. But there's just some swagger, some passion coming from him, and that's what you want, from a quarterback. And you saw that a little bit in Kenny Pickett in his final year. making plays with his feet, taking hits, wanting to put everything on the line. And that's what Holstein is starting to build here through this spring camp compared to last spring camp. But he talked a lot about also being honest with guys, that he's going to be the leader, that he will let a player know. And he even said that, hey, if they want to throw a punch at him, so be it. That he's going to tell it how it is, be honest with his players, and he's going to hold everyone accountable, not just himself. So some very interesting character developments, not just on the field, but personal-wise, leadership-wise for this Pitt offense. And it's sort of led and translated to some of the other areas of this offense when you think about the transfers and the freshmen that have come in. Jake Overman, like I said, talked about it, how they've been able to get the freshmen along and right into the thick of things here in this offense. And another thing that Holstein talked about was this offense and this receiver group, he feels is in a much better position than they were a year ago, even last season, with the depth that they have. They brought in Katarius Hicks, Andy Jean, Deuce Spann, and a ton of freshmen, Cam Sapp, Bryce Yates, Tony Kinsler, a lot of different weapons, and Holstein's excited about it. He says they're much better depth-wise than they were a year ago, and a lot of the players, and it came out of Overman's mouth and Holstein's mouth, so when two guys are saying it, not even knowing that they're probably going to say it together, saying that this offense is light years ahead of where they were last year. Of course, they should be, but it's a good thing to hear that come out of the mouths of two leaders, two potential captains of this Pitt football team, and that has to do with the way they've been handling Cade Bell's system, playing much more at an up-tempo pace. They were catching the defense off guard last week in a couple of practices, a couple of the drills. So they're in a much better spot than they were last year. And, there was a lot of skepticism last spring. And you think about part of the reason why maybe Dayon Hayes left and transferred from Pitt, because he wasn't too sure. There was the report that he wasn't too sure about this offense and where it's going to be, if they're going to be good enough. And it turned out to be pretty good to start the season 7-0. And then it faltered, but there was injuries. There was Eli Holstein, Nate Yarnell was hurt, banged up. The offensive line, Branson Taylor went out. So now you got this offense healthy. It's only spring. Obviously, there's a long way to go. Long offseason in front of them. Summer months coming ahead before they even get into fall camp. But to hear that they're only entering or finishing practice number 4 of spring camp, and they're talking about this offense is so much better already. The installs, they're being able to add new installs, new plays, just because where they're at and where these transfers and these freshmen have been able to come in and click sort of right away, and Overman and Holstein being able to bring them up to speed is a big thing right now, and a big development to hear that from the Pitt offensive personnel, that they're at this point in camp. So Pitt head coach Pat Narduzzi also spoke, and he spoke about obviously some of the good things from the offense. One thing he highlighted was the offensive line play. He was asked about, how about the tackles, which is going to be something we're monitoring all spring. And with Jeff Piercy from Michigan, Kendall Stanley from Charlotte, he said that he's really happy with the way the offensive line's playing right now, and they're running the ball also better than they were this time last year, which is another key improvement. And credit to that offensive line with the way they're playing. Maybe it's a disservice to the defensive line that they're not playing, and not a good thing that they're not playing well against the run, but it's good to hear that look, the offensive line's starting to come together, and if they can stay healthy, maybe they can be actually a relatively sound and potentially strength unit of this Pitt football team. But there's still a lot to be seen with that. I mean, there's still a lot to go here. Who's going to start at left tackle? Is it Piercy? Is it Stanley? Ryan Baer's the leader of this group, it seems like, at least on the outside at tackle. He appears to have right tackle pretty much in front of him, unless they feel Kendall Stanley is one of those two, Piercy or Stanley, don't win that left tackle, but feel they're just too good to leave out of the starting lineup, and then maybe Baer gets bumped. But I mentioned it before, it's a good problem to have. You have 3 tackles who can start, all have starting experience. Piercy's coming from Michigan, one of the best offensive lines in the country, just coming off 2 years removed from a national championship. He has plenty of playing experience, some starting experience. So the offensive line seems to be in a good spot right now, entering week 2 of camp. Now, they just added pads. They just put pads on. We'll see where things go with the O-line moving forward. And they do have their first live full scrimmage on Saturday at Acrisure Stadium. So once we sort of hear the intel from that, the talk from that and the observations, we'll get to know even more of how this offensive line looks. And the defensive line, which, again, a big storyline, defensive end. We talked about it already a couple of times. One guy that when Pat Narduzzi was mentioned, hey, how does that D-end room look right now? The first guy he mentioned, which was a surprise to me, but was Maverick Gracio, who, watching him in practice, he looks okay. He looks solid. I mean, obviously, we talked about him having the big play against West Virginia in the backyard brawl with the block punt, but Narduzzi said he's looked really good so far through spring. He's standing out, has shown really good spurts. So it's a guy to keep an eye on, and there's a lot of options at DN between Nate Temple, Jaden Moore, Blaine Spires, Joey Zielinski, those guys that they've brought in. Temple obviously being the outer statesman of this group, but good thing to hear that a younger guy, a young redshirt freshman, redshirt sophomore type guy is coming in and potentially could fight for some playing time from some snaps and not just be on special teams. So good to hear Pat Narduzzi bring that up. He talked about a couple other guys that have been standing out a little bit. I asked about a guy who maybe has flown under the radar in the receiver room in Zion Fowler L, who is now into his redshirt sophomore year. He said he's looking pretty good. 4 practices under a belt. He's looked pretty strong. Has a lot of athletic ability. He's quick. He's a good route runner. So it'll be interesting where he just fits into this mold. And, in a couple of episodes, we're going to talk about, obviously, the wide receiver room once we get to that positional breakdown. But that's a guy that I'm interested to see how he improves, how he sort of finds room in that receiver unit, because it's very stacked. And as Holstein said, it's much deeper than it was last year at this time. So some good things to hear from Pitt spring practice number 4. Now, the one unit that I paid attention to today, I watched pretty closely, was the linebacker unit. And this was one of the best, most productive units on the entire team last year for Pitt in 2024. Obviously producing a first-team All-American in Kyle Lewis, but Lewis leading in sacks, tackles for loss, up there amongst the leaders in tackles. Then you have Rasheem Biles right behind him, was an All-ACC selection. And Braylon Lovelace, who's going to move in to start right now at the Mike linebacker position. Pitt is losing or has lost already 2 guys up the middle in Brandon George and Key Thompson. And then also did lose Jordan Bass to the transfer portal to Virginia Tech back home. He went. So Lovelace is moving into the middle. And I like Lovelace. I think he's got some speed to it, got a nice step to him. It'll be interesting how he can manage playing middle linebacker, the Mike position, as the main starter. I mean, I kind of like him as a little bit more of an outside guy. He's not the biggest, but he's got some speed. So as a run stopper, it'll be interesting to see how he can handle that task. But behind him, the guy that should back him up, saw a lot of playing time last year, is Jeremiah Marcelin, who is going to be a sophomore this year, burned his red shirt as a true freshman last year. He is a stout linebacker. He's 6'2", 235 pounds. So he's a stout linebacker. He's got a nice burst to him. Watching back some of his tape from last year, he did some decent things when he had the time to do so. So middle linebacker, Mike linebacker will be very interesting to watch between Lovelace and Marcelin, just because it was very veteran heavy with George and Thompson there. But now you move Lovelace in there, and then Marcelin was working there regardless last year, the whole season. Now, elsewhere at the star linebacker position, we talked about Kyle Lewis. He'll be your starter. No, obviously, I mean, that's pretty clear cut. Cannot, obviously, I mean, you're not going to supplant All-American guy there. And watching him, he looks faster. He looks stronger. And he talked last week and said that he wasn't content with his season as an All-American, even with what he was able to do, that there's a lot of improvement to do mentally, physically. So he's got an offseason ahead of him as he tries to repeat as an All-American, as the leader of this linebacker group. Behind him is Ohio State transfer Jaden Bonsu, who I expect to sort of be that two-deep guy behind Kyle Lewis. Today at practice, he was off to the side working with the training staff, so not sure if he tweaked something, but that's something to monitor here. We'll see what happens there, but he looked good. He looked like he was moving just fine, but the one thing that I really like about Bonsu is he's a big guy. I mean, he looks bigger than maybe what he's listed at. He's 6'2" on the roster, 210 pounds, but he looks big, and I think this guy can be a really nice depth piece for this Pitt linebacker unit. Again, we're basing this all off of potential. We still got to see what they can do on the field. But from what we've seen in practice, he just looks big. He has the makings of being a really solid linebacker. And there's still an opportunity that he moves back to safety, which is what he was brought in originally as from Ohio State, where he played at Ohio State. So we'll see what happens with him. We'll see if he gets back on the field Thursday, back with the unit working out. And then behind them will be projected Cameron Lindsey, and then the freshman Emmanuel Taylor. Cameron Lindsey's a Whippeal guy, an Aliquippa guy, knows how to win, physical, tough. He's been making plays. Jacob Bernowski put out some of the top players so far in camp, and one of them was Lindsey from this past weekend. And he's looking the part. I mean, we've seen the last 2 years where these redshirt freshmen, these sophomores have been able to step up and break out for Pitt. Well, who's it going to be in this linebacker unit now? Is it going to be Jeremiah Marshland? Is it going to be Cameron Lindsey? On the other side, Davin Bruton's another guy. Lindsey's a guy that, it might be tough for him to crack through Bonsu and obviously Kyle Lewis, but if he can get some playing time elsewhere on the field at the linebacker unit, I think he could be an impact type guy along with Marshland. Those are the two guys as second-year players that I'm really high on, that I think could be really good for this Pitt team. Davin Bruton, I think, still has a lot of work to go. He's a little bit of a slower guy, so he doesn't have the speed per se that you might want exactly, but he's over on the money linebacker side, and that will be led by, of course, Rasheem Biles, who will be a big factor again for this Pitt team. He could potentially turn into an All-American candidate for this Pitt defense, which would just be another step in the right direction for the linebacker unit that's already was really solid, really productive last year. And then behind him, talked about Bruton, but Nick Lappy, who's been here for quite a while, has sort of, stayed sort of in the shadows, but has played quite a bit of games, special teams, has stepped in, mop-up duty a little bit in a lot of games. Expect him to sort of be maybe the secondary guy at the money linebacker unless they shift someone else over there, whether that's Cameron Lindsey or Davin Bruton sort of takes over. So, but all in all, I mean, this linebacker unit is poised to have another really good season. It's only spring. We'll talk all over again about this in the fall, about these units and where they're standing at then. But there's so much promise with this linebacker unit between Kyle Lewis, Rasheem Biles, Braylon Lovelace, and then the guys behind them could be just as good as those with their development as the spring goes. So that's sort of a quick look at the linebacker position. We'll talk again more about all these positional units coming up over the next couple of weeks. Talking a little bit about the safety unit on Thursday, and we'll see, what appears to be going on there. Talk a little bit about Cruz Brookins. Jesse Anderson's gotten some praise so far at safety. Kavir Baines is a guy that's come in. So a lot of talk about there. And then who is going to back up Rashad Battle and Tamon Lynham at cornerback. So we'll get into that on Thursday, but this has been another edition of the Pittsburgh Sports Now Football Pulse. I'm Nathan Breisinger. Be sure to check out all of our content over on PittsburghSportsNow.com as we continue through Pitt football's spring camp of 2025.